Oke, nah teman-teman pasti sudah baca posternya ya. Judul kuliah tamu hari ini apa? Apa yo? Conscientious Brands. Terus ada judul kecilnya apa? Do the right thing and be profitable. Oke, nah sekarang saya mau ngenalin dulu. Kan tadi saya sudah bicara kita kedatangan tamu jauh sekali. Nah, Prof Nathalia ini adalah seorang profesor ya. Profesor loh, beliau masih muda, ya enggak? Muda kan, muda banget ya, udah pada tahu kan dari posternya, terus beliau yang sudah hadir di depan sini, muda banget gak? Tapi gelarnya udah profesor. Nah, kira-kira teman-teman sudah punya ekspektasi belum? Apa yang mau disampaikan oleh Prof Nathalia ini? Apa ya? Tentang apa? Kira-kira ada nggak kalian berekspektasi? Apakah sharing tentang PhD beliau? Apakah sharing pengalaman beliau jadi profesor? Atau gimana? Gimana ya? Apa? Ada? Gimana? Oke, ya udah kayaknya kalian masih clueless banget ya. Ya udah, ini saya sebagai perkenalan awal saja. Prof Nathalia itu sebenarnya adalah orang Indonesia ya, tapi beliau sudah lama tinggal di Scotland. Oke, di Edinburgh, tapi sebelum ke Scotland, beliau itu kuliahnya di Belanda pernah. Terus di berbagai kampus dan sekarang beliau bekerja sebagai Head of International. Nah, jadi beliau yang mengurusi segala macam internasionalisasi dan sekarang sedang mulai berproses untuk kerjasama dengan departemen kita. Oke, nah kita nggak usah lama-lama lagi ya, kita langsung saja persilakan kepada Prof Nathalia.
Selamat pagi teman-teman sekalian. Saya tadi bilang nanti presentasinya bahasa Inggris saja ya, karena saya sebenarnya orang Surabaya. Nanti karena tadi Bu Linda sudah bilang kalau saya sudah lama tinggal di UK, jadi sejak lulus SMA saya pindah ke Belanda 1,5 tahun, lalu saya pindah ke UK. Takutnya nanti kalau saya presentasi bahasa Indonesia yang keluar tuh bahasa Jawa sama bahasa Inggris. Kan kalian orang banyak kan mungkin asalnya dari Jawa Barat ya, nanti malah bingung gitu, ngomong apa ini, nggak ngerti ya kan. Jadi saya bilang yaudahlah presentasinya bahasa Inggris aja gitu kan ya. Tapi nanti kalau misalnya ada yang nggak ngerti mau tanya bahasa Indonesia saya bisa jawab ya kan. Kalau misalnya pokoknya jangan malu-malu lah kalau mau tanya ya kan. Untuk presentasi hari ini namanya Conscientious Brand. Itu sesuatu yang saya benar-benar passionate banget sih. Ini sesuatu yang sangat baru, sampai tahun ini ada Global Brand Conference yang kita host di Edinburgh. Temanya itu Conscientious Brands. Jadi kalau kamu lihat Conscientious Brands atau kalau kamu aktif di LinkedIn, kamu lihat Global Brand Conference, pasti muncul deh Conscientious Brands itu karena ini topik yang memang baru. Okay. So maybe I will introduce myself first. So my name is Nathalia Chandra. I'm currently a professor in marketing and also associate dean international at Edinburgh Napier University. So this year I actually celebrated my 20th anniversary of living in Europe. So for 1.5 years I lived and studied in the Netherlands. And then I think in 2006 I moved to the UK, and I completed my undergraduate degree in the UK, and then I carry on studying and I got a scholarship at Edinburgh Napier University. My PhD was actually in brand leadership, and I was working for financial services company when I did my PhD. So what else? So Conscientious Brands is something that I have been very interested in and very passionate about. And I think it's really interesting because after working for, or after conducting my research with financial services sector for a while, I decided that, actually I want to do something that was quite different. So for some time I was actually doing a lot of research in Indonesia on the ethics of tobacco marketing. So ethical marketing is one of my research passion as well. So I did the research with University of Gajah Mada. And then, for some time, I was spending a lot of time looking at different, perspectives on ethics. And then in about 2006, I was introduced to the idea of conscientious brands. What was quite interesting then, in 2016, when I started teaching conscientious brands, and I include that in my brand management and strategic brand management modules, students were kind of like, oh, what is this? I don't really believe that brand could do good. Okay, they say that I don't really understand why brand has to do good. Okay, I don't really understand why there is a requirement that brand has to contribute to the society and the planet. So that was their perception in 2016. Okay, and then for some time, what was quite interesting is that the perspective actually changed. Okay, so you probably heard about the idea of sustainability. You probably heard about the idea that businesses actually have responsibility, not only to their shareholders or people who invested in the organization, but also to society and the planet. So that's pretty much the idea of conscientious brands. So when I was trying to translate the idea of conscientious brands, I was trying to figure out what is it, the idea of conscientious brands in Indonesian. So when I put it, conscientious brands in Google Translate, what came up is that it's actually merek dengan hati nurani. Okay, so if we were talking about the idea of conscientious, it's about making sure that what we do is something that we believe in, something that we do with awareness, something that we know that when we do something, it's not only benefiting a group of stakeholder, but it will benefit a lot of stakeholder groups. Okay, so this is kind of like the idea of conscientious brands. So about a couple of years ago, I started research on conscientious brands. So the idea of conscientious brands were coined by two prominent professors, Professor Nicholas In and also Professor Oriol Iglesias. And then they are a part of what we call the Madinga group. So I'm also now a member of the Madinga group. So only invited, the group only invited certain people to be a part of their group. So Madinga group actually consists of brand consultants, academics, and also visionaries from around the world who try to promote the idea of conscientious brands, who try to promote that businesses could actually do good for the society and the planet. Okay. So that's kind of like a little bit of history of conscientious brands. I myself teach brand management at the undergraduate level and also at postgraduate level at Reneipe University. We have a number of programs running in Hong Kong and in Singapore and also in different parts of the world. But for brand management and strategic brand management, we run it in Hong Kong, Singapore, and also online. So every year, and also in the UK, of course. So every year, we have about 600 or 700 students undertaking this particular module. So conscientious brands is actually a part of one of the modules that we include in our course. Okay, so maybe we can go back to the presentation, and then I can give you some ideas on the background why conscientious brands become very important, and then why you should kind of like be aware that brands could do good for the society and the planet. Okay, next. So why we're looking at the idea of conscientious brands? So we recognize that there is growing stakeholders' expectation as to the probity of organizations and their brands. Okay, so we recognize that brands could actually have a very important role in the society. Okay, so a lot of people, when we're talking about the concept of brands are actually being used by individuals to actually express themselves. Okay, so that's kind of like the importance of brands. Brands could be very personal. And we often say that brands is also a representation of individuals. So there is also this belief that brands should be helping to find solutions by improving the wealth and well-being and addressing the existential challenges affecting society. Okay? So brands actually have a lot of resources. Brands have a lot of impact. Brands have a lot of ability to change or to influence people who are connected to the brands. Okay? Not only the consumers, but also other stakeholders. There is also increasing expectations that brands should take stances on issues and integrate them into the core of the decision-making process. Okay? And then the most important thing is that there is a belief that businesses can be a force of good. Okay? For the people who are using the brands, for the society where the brands actually exist, for the shareholders, of course, who invested in the brand. And also, recently, we hear about the impact of brands and businesses on the environment. Okay. Next. Oops. Okay. So, what does conscience actually mean? Okay, so in Indonesian, conscience could mean hati nurani. So conscience is actually something that guides us in our action and contains the idea that we should be aware about the needs of others. Okay, so the idea of the conscientious brands is that brands should not be selfish. Brands should not be just focusing on generating profits. Okay. So our choices are actually determined by the inner voice or moral compass that helps to guide us to a virtuous life that incorporates such behavior as altruism, trust, and also reciprocity. So this is very important. When you talk about brands are actually created by humans. Okay? So organizations also consist of humans, consist of people. So if brands are actually the representation of your organizations, then you want to make sure that the brands actually show who you are as an organization. Okay. Now, this is really interesting because this is also kind of like the English language. So we just completed a massive research project on conscientious brands, and then that involved researchers from Germany, Norway, Spain, Italy, and also obviously in the UK. And then we have this debate about the term that we are using, whether it's the idea of conscience or whether the idea of being conscious. Okay, so when you talk about conscience here, we're talking about hati nurani. Okay, and then when you're talking about conscious, it's about kesadaran. Okay, which means that being aware. Okay, so that is a conscious. So we then kind of like identify. What is really the difference between conscience and also conscious? Okay, so the definition that we kind of like take in the end is that when you talk about conscious, it's about kesadaran. And then conscience is actually transforming or like implementing that consciousness into action. So that's what we call conscience. Okay, so conscience is actually about transforming the belief that we have about something into actions. Okay, so that's what we call conscience. So why this idea of conscience is actually very important in the context of branding. Now, when you talk about brands, okay, most of the time our people are very, very skeptical about brands. Okay, because they will always say brands is just about telling what the good things about what you do as an organization. Okay, it doesn't matter whether what you do is good. What's quite interesting about the idea of brands is that sometimes what we say about the brands and what we do as a brand can be completely different. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, you can talk about, when you talk about marketing, you talk about advertising, you can praise your brands, you can actually say about how good your brand is, but a lot of marketers and a lot of brand managers, sometimes they forget that the consumers now are very, very clever, okay? Consumers are very sophisticated, that they're not only looking or evaluating you as a brand based on what you say, but also what you do, okay? So when there is a gap between what you say as an organization or as a brand and what you do as a brand, it could actually result in customer distrust. Okay? So for example, you will say, okay, my product is actually a very good quality product. You put that in your advertisement and say that this is excellent product, this is a good quality product. However, when your consumers actually buy the product, suddenly after a week the product breaks down. Okay, so there is a gap between what you say as a brand and then what happened or what you do as a brand. Okay, or you will say something that, we are an environmentally friendly brand. Okay, we support recycle, for example. What happened is, in reality, perhaps you only say that as a lip service. You only say that because that looks good on our advertisement. But maybe in reality, you actually polluted the rivers, for example, with plastic bottles as a result of what you produce. So that you can see there is a gap between what you say as a brand and what you do or what happened as a brand. Okay? So that's why the idea of conscience is actually very important. For me personally, it's very important for the future marketing managers or the future brand managers to actually realize that you need to make sure that you do what you preach as a brand. It's absolutely crucial. As soon as the consumers or your stakeholders recognize there is a gap between what you say and what you do as a brand, then there is that could result in consumer distrust. Okay? And then, in the past, we always say that every day consumers are being exposed to maybe about 300, 400 brands, okay, per day. You see advertisement, you see on the street, for example, on television, but now advertisements are following us everywhere, okay? So we are being exposed to about 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 brands every single day. Okay, if you go to, Google, for example, you will see all of the Google ads. You will see all of the brands is just being given to you. So consumers have a lot of choices. Okay, consumers have a lot of options. So when they don't trust your brand, they can easily switch to another brand. Okay, and this is why it is very important that you always deliver what you promise as a brand. Okay, and this is where the idea of conscientious brand become very important. Okay, next. So, conscience. The idea of conscience is about being aware and being critical about our actions, about being able to pause and think, what is the impact of my actions on our stakeholders? So, you know what's the difference between shareholders and stakeholders? Okay, so shareholders is normally people who have invested in your company. They normally would want to have money or profit as a return of investment. And then you also have what we call stakeholders. So stakeholders are people who have a stake or have interest in your organization. So that could be first your consumers, your employees, the government, the society, the community where you actually access, your people that you advertise to. You talk about non-government organizations who have an interest in your organizations. Okay, so that's when we talk about conscientious brands, is about understanding the impact of what we do what is the impact of what we do as a brand on stakeholders. So it's not just about shareholders or people who are invested in your company, but people who are interested in your company or could be impacted on your action. Okay. when we talk about the idea of conscientious brand, we recognize that, brands cannot exist or operate on its own. So they need to recognize as well that, we have to work together to be able to make transformative change, or we have to work together to make change happen for the good of the society and the planet. So that's kind of like the idea why, where conscience actually come from. Okay, so the next thing is, So when you think about conscientious brands, then you need to think about critical thinking. First, you have to be able to evaluate what is the impact of your actions on the society and how we can make that change actually happen. Okay. Next. Okay. So this is kind of like the definition of conscientious brand that was proposed by In and Iglesias. In fact, I currently work with these amazing professors. They're very, very visionary in terms of how they want brands to actually act and behave. So conscientious brands actually have a clear transformative purpose. Okay. So and then a sense of responsibility towards people and the planet. So when we talk about the idea of transformative purpose, it's basically talking about how we can make the world a better place. Okay? How we can actually, no matter how small what we do as a brand, it should be able to create a positive impact on the society and the planet. And then there is a sense of responsibility, towards people and the planet. It's making sure that we are aware about what actions that we do could have an impact on the society and the planet. And then they're built upon the willingness to think issue through critically from the perspective of all stakeholders. So the idea of balancing stakeholder needs become very important. So it's not just about the investors of your organization, but also about your employees, about your customers, about your society. Okay? Employees, in fact, have a very, very important role in your organization. Have you been, if you have friends who are actually working for certain organizations, for example, maybe just give an example, just kind of like a very simple example about a restaurant. So you may have a friend who works in a restaurant, right? So he works in the restaurant, and then one day you were saying to your friends that I'm going to go and have food in your restaurants, and your friends say, no, don't go to my restaurant because it's absolutely crap. Okay, they're not hygienic. They use very cheap ingredients. The service is very rude. Okay, and then they will say, "I only stay there because I just need the salary." Have you been in a situation before? Like when your employees actually talk really bad about the companies that they work for because they know, the information or like what the company do internally. Okay. So that's why when you talk about the idea of conscientious brand, you have to start internally. You need to make sure, in fact, it's not only about conscientious brands, it's about all brands. You need to make sure that what you do, that you're very consistent in terms of what you say or what you preach externally and what you do internally. Okay, so we always say that brands actually have a duality. Brands should be, the concept should be the same and the action should be the same externally and as well as internally. Okay? So in the context of conscientious brands, we talk about how the values of the organization should be embedded in everything that the brands do. Okay, so that's very, very important. So when you talk about brands, most of the time people talk about external branding, about how brands could make consumers buy more, okay? But in reality, recent literature talk quite a lot about how brands are very important internally as well. You cannot have a gap between how your external audiences perceive you and how your internal audiences actually perceive you, okay? So when you talk about conscience, it's all about making sure that we balance all of the needs and perspectives of all stakeholders who are involved in your brand. And then again, when we talk about the idea of conscientious brands, we talk more about how we can work together Okay, we as many stakeholders as possible to deliver transformative change. So when we did our research, we about 20 global brands across the world who kind of like adopt the idea of conscientious brands. They actually say that they often work with their competitors to make changes in the society, to make changes in the environment. They work together to come up with a solution on how we can make changes in the society and the planet. Next. So when we talk about the idea of conscientious brands, it's not a completely new concept. So if you look at the literature, there have been a lot of existing concepts that touch upon the idea of conscientious brands. So the first one is talking about corporate social responsibility, right? So you talk about when you look at especially in Indonesia, there was a time where every company needed to have corporate social responsibility report, including tobacco companies. Okay, so this is really interesting. When I did my research on the ethics of tobacco marketing in Indonesia, as you know, a lot of children were actually smoking in Indonesia already, right? So what was quite interesting is that every tobacco company in Indonesia will have corporate social responsibility report. They will say about how what they do as the tobacco companies are to help the society. Okay, so for example, by providing scholarships to children, or sometimes supporting the graduation events in schools. Okay, in some universities they actually have the library. One of the tobacco brand, I won't mention the name. One of the tobacco brand actually have a section in the library. And the students love spending time in that section because they were saying that this is because the tobacco company donated air conditioning, books. They say this is the best place in the library. So that also creates this kind of positive perception towards tobacco companies. Okay. And in reality, at the same time, they're trying to influence these people to buy tobacco products. Okay, so you could see that where is the social responsibility on this issue? Okay, so you talk about the idea of sustainability. So when we talk about sustainability, you talk about balancing people, profit, and also planet. This is actually very important. As a brand, even if you're a charity, you still need to think about profit. Right? How would you will not be able to grow if you don't have profits. But the thing is, we recognize, more and more companies will preach about the idea of sustainability, but profit is still their number one goal, rather than what they're trying to deliver to the society and the planet. Okay? So when you talk the idea of have you heard about the idea of triple bottom lines? Have you heard of this? Yeah? People, planet, and profit, right? So this is actually, we recognize as well that there is a lot of shift in terms of what people view about in terms of the order of these people, planet, and profit. Most of the time, the profit is at the top. And then, if you're lucky, then you might be able to contribute to the society and the planet. Okay? And then we talk about the idea of ethical brands. Okay? So when we talk about the ethical brands, you're talking about how we need to pause and think about whether our actions are actually ethical or not. And then what was quite interesting is ethics itself, it could be interpreted very differently from one culture and another. What is ethical in Indonesia may not be perceived differently in different parts of the world. And also brand authenticity. So the idea of brand authenticity is about being authentic. It's about being true to who you are as a brand. So this is also very, very important. Okay, being true to who you are as a brand. So how does then the idea of conscientious brands differ from all of these existing concepts? Okay, so according to a number of authors who were have been looking at this idea of conscientious brands, they basically say that conscientious brands have this purpose. They actually have this goal to make the world a better place. they have a transformative purpose. Okay? They were actually developed to make a change or to make a difference for the society and the planet. So that's the difference between conscientious brands and the rest of the brands. And then they have this sense of responsibility. They want to make sure that their actions do not have negative impacts on the stakeholders who are involved or the stakeholders who have interest in their on their brand. Now, in Iglesias, I actually did about 18 case studies looking at brands around the world, including some of them were actually in Asia. And then they identified that there were common attributes amongst these conscientious brands. The first one is that actually they're principles driven. They're driven by the values that the brands actually believe as an organization. They're fair. That means that they're not only taking into consideration the interests of one stakeholder group, but they take the interests of every stakeholder group who has interest in their organization. They're open. Okay, so open means that they're actually willing to work with other organizations. And another thing that is very important is that they're very transparent. So open can be interpreted in two different ways, about being able to work with other stakeholders, about working together with other parties to make the transformative change. But more importantly, for consumers, transparency is very important. And that is the conversation that we talk about openness. And then obviously the responsible is about being aware about the impact of our actions to the society and the planet. Next. So, I was very passionate about the idea of conscientious brands. I think it's maybe because it's actually influenced by, when I'm teaching or when I'm reading the literature, we were bombarded with a lot of these ideas. Brands is just about making people buy more. Brands is about making people, it's about consumerism. It's about making people spending a lot more money to buy your products for the purpose of generating profits for you. But we also recognize that, brands actually have a lot of resources, okay, that they can use for the benefits of the society and the planet, okay? So what we did is then we conducted research. Initially, we did research with 17 global marketing brand managers around the world. Okay, they're all actually brands that exist and operated globally. And then in the end, we ended up getting 20 interviews. So initially, I have a lot of connections with marketing agencies in Scotland. So my initial thought is doing some research with marketing agencies. This is where all it started, about understanding how they think about, conscientious brands. And then the reason that we were looking at marketing agencies is that they work with so many different brands, for big brands, small brands, brands that are ethical, brands that are not. So we were kind of like looking at, do they see any changes in terms of how the brands actually behave, and whether there are benefits for brands to start switching their thinking in terms of generating profit. They're thinking about how they can make a good contribution to the society and the planet. So we decided to do 35 marketing research. Sorry, we decided to do interviews with 35 marketing agencies in the UK. And then we decided to do consumer survey. So this is really interesting one. So we started doing exploratory research by doing qualitative survey. So it's just kind of what we send questionnaires to 525 consumers. It's actually more than that. There are 525 consumers who respond to our qualitative survey. So we're asking them about why, if you're talking about conscientious brands, what would come to your mind? What do you think about the characteristic of conscientious brands, and etc. So after we did the qualitative survey, we actually conducted another study. So we did in-depth interviews with 25 consumers as well. Okay, so we used the data, and then we did some more research looking for more in-depth information from the consumers by doing in-depth interviews. I'm a qualitative researcher, by the way. I love reading, and one of my specialism is actually doing a lot of case studies for organizations. So what I'm going to present to you today is kind of like the preliminary findings of this qualitative research. We actually have expanded the definition of conscientious brands, but the paper is currently under review, so I cannot really reveal that. So I thought I'm just going to give you an idea of what the key findings of our study. Okay, so next. So these are the 5 characteristics that we identified from the raw data that we get. Okay, so just a further analysis that we did afterwards based on this. So our first findings actually shows that, conscientious brands, they're typically driven by organization belief. Okay, these brands actually have values which become the foundation of all of their actions, their communications, how they establish relationship with other stakeholders. And then the second characteristics is have a transformative purpose. So it's about making the world a better place. They actually want to make an impact, no matter how small, to the society and the planet. They're also very committed to sustainability. Okay, so they're not only looking at profit, but they're looking at how they can make changes on the society and the planet. Okay, how they actually recognize that profit is not everything. Okay, when we are trying to grow an organization, there's also some trade-off that we need to think about. What are the impacts of those trade-off? It's about balancing stakeholder needs. So this is something that a lot of brands are actually missing, because most of the time they think about the investors and also the consumers, but they forgot about the employees. They forgot about the society, okay, where they actually live in. Okay, so if you're a factory, they should not only think about the products that they're going to sell, but also they need to think about what is the impact of building that factory on the society, on the community where they actually based. Okay, thinking about the residual products that they actually create, thinking about the pollution that they could actually create. Okay, so this is quite important because, it's not just about creating products or services, but it's also about thinking about how you could actually what sort of impact that you can create for all of your actions or your activities as a brand. And then the fifth one, this is actually super important, especially from the consumer perspective, is about acting with integrity. Okay, so this is about doing what you say you're going to be doing. Okay, so this is very important. From the consumer's perspective, the fifth is important because the only way that they can evaluate whether they can trust you as a brand or not, acting with integrity. Okay, next. So I'm going to go deeper on these characteristics, and I'm going to give you some examples. And I actually managed to find some examples from Indonesia as well. You may or may not know these brands. Okay, and then in the end, I want to know, do you have any brands that you think are actually conscientious? Okay. So next. So these are some of the findings that we have. So some of the quotes that I put in here. So the first characteristics that we found from our findings is about conscientious brand is driven by organizational belief. So one of the quotes here, A means agency, M means manager, and then C means consumer. So what we do is actually corroborating all of these findings together. So one of the agencies here basically say that I think the characteristics will be the brand's decision to follow a course of action because they believe it's right, rather than because they believe it will be the most profitable in the immediate short term. Okay. Normally with conscientious brands, they will think long term, okay, rather than short term. Okay. What was quite interesting as well is that when we dig deeper, when we speak to the managers actually say that, there are a lot of short-term objectives that we need to meet to be able to survive as an organization. Okay, we need to think about the short-term profit that we're making, and also the long-term impact that we make as a business. And then another definition, when we talk about different by organization beliefs, we also talk about, it's trying to be true to what it actually represents, okay, where it comes from and what it will go to. And ultimately, consumer expect to a brand, for a brand to stand for something and deliver against its primary purpose, okay? Again, this is all about, if you say that a brand, that you care about the community, then you need to show that you genuinely care about the community. You're not doing it for a show or because it looks good on the paper. Okay? Or sometimes, there will be brands and it's actually very difficult for a company. Okay? One of the issue, or like what companies actually often face is that when they are facing a financial difficulty, this is where company will have to think critically how they're going to react on that. Okay, so most of the time, like for example, during COVID, right, a lot of companies actually say, I can't afford to look after my employees, so I'm going to kind of let go all of my employees. And what was quite interesting is we also found a lot of these owners actually still can afford a very luxurious life. Okay, the owner of the brands still they're being able to go on excursions around the world. Okay, while at the same time they're firing half of their staff because they say that they don't have money. Okay. Do you see what I mean here? It's like their actions do not really represent what the brand is all about. Okay, so it is a quite difficult balance. Okay, in terms of how you survive as a brand, how you actually manage the impact that you have on the society and the planet, and how you actually stay true to your belief as a brand. Okay. So they're actually committed to a course or principle that is independent from consumer trends or competitor action. So this is very important. Have you heard about, I'm just trying to think, maybe later you can tell me if there are any examples from Indonesia. So when you talk about, let's say, corporate social responsibilities, okay? So I think the government also expects you to do corporate social responsibility, but before it was kind of like requirement for the government to actually from the government to produce corporate social responsibility reports. A lot of companies, what they do is that they just do it and then they say this is actually our CSR. Okay, they do it because everybody else is doing it. Okay, rather than because they believe that it is the right thing to do. Have you heard about the idea of Black Lives Matters? Have you heard about this? Yeah, so there was kind of like this movement, especially in the West, where they were kind of like saying about how the black communities actually have been put at disadvantage. Okay, so when this movement actually happened, suddenly every brand in the Western world, or like a lot of brands in the Western world, decided that they're going to adopt the Black Lives Matters campaign as a part of their marketing activities. Okay, so this is really, really interesting to see that. So one of the example is that, one of these big, one of the things that we came up in the interviews is that they don't always mention about the names of the organization or the names of the brand, but they will say something like, well, when you talk about the idea of Black Lives Matters, externally, this organization will talk about they're supporting the black community, they're doing a lot of goods for the black community. Suddenly on their advertisement, you see a lot of people with black actors and actresses, and on their advertisements, they will start using black actors and actresses to be their influencers. Okay? So previously they never did that. However, when you look internally, the number of people in the organization who are black is very limited. Do you see? This is really, it's almost like hypocritical when you say externally they start using all of these, actors and actresses. Or even if you do watch Netflix, Yeah. Recently, if you see every Netflix movie, then there will be a lot more black actors and actresses who were represented in the movie. Okay, and it's the same with brands. So when we look at a lot of the advertisement of these brands, you will see that there's all about diversity. It's all, you see people from all sort of walking, all sort of ethnic backgrounds being represented on their advertisement and also their marketing campaigns. Okay, but in reality, when you look inside the organization, there still consists of white people, pure white people. So that you could see that there is a difference in terms of what they do externally and what they do internally. So that means that the organization do not act based on the organizational belief. Okay, next. So this is another example. Do you know Ben and Jerry's ice cream? Yeah, I love ice cream. When I get really stressed out, I eat ice cream. That's what I do. It's actually, the biggest, do you know that actually, at least in the UK, the biggest consumers of ice cream is actually women. The biggest target market for ice cream is actually women. So talking about Ben and Jerry's, do you know that Ben and Jerry's is actually an example of a brand who act and who always been acting with activism? Okay. So if you look at what they actually support, this is before they're even acquired by Unilever. Okay, so the core of the brand is that, okay, we're going to be making very delicious ice cream, but we also want to be an ice cream brand that make changes in the world. Okay, so they supported all of these campaigns related to human rights and dignity, social and economic justice, and also environmental protection. Okay, so what was quite interesting is that Unilever was bought. Ben and Jerry's was bought by Unilever. Okay, Unilever brand is so big, they're everywhere. And then a couple of years ago, I think it's a couple of years ago, Ben and Jerry's founders actually accused Unilever of breaking a deal in Israel. And there's a lot of issues in Israel. And actually, Ben and Jerry's didn't want to sell their brands in Israel. Okay, so that was a part of the agreement that they have. And then apparently Unilever, as the parent company, decided that they're going to license Ben and Jerry's brands in one of the brands based in Israel. Okay, and then these brands were actually going to be sold in Gaza. Okay, so Ben and Jerry's was so angry about it. Even though they are the child brand of Unilever now, they decided that they're going to sue Unilever. Okay, so it was all over the newspaper. And it's kind of like an example of why would you spend a lot of time suing your own parent company unless you don't believe in what your values is. But for Ben and Jerry's, it was very important for them to actually take a stance about what they believe in. Okay, so that's an example. If the majority of brands, they will think like, I don't want to spend a lot of time. And think, they do. Okay, so the founders of Ben and Jerry's actually sued Unilever because of the decision of license their ice cream brand in Gaza. Next. So have a transformative purpose. So we always think that when you talk about conscientious brands, it's about making the world a better place. It is very, it's very difficult to make a world a better place, okay? But the thing is, a brand has more reach than any individual, okay? Recent research actually shows that a lot of consumers believe that brands have more power than government, okay? When you're a government, or like if you were on a country government, your impact could only be in that one country. But once you become a global brand, okay, your impact could be all around the world. Okay, so that's why people believe that, brands actually have this power to change how the society or how the environment actually works. So when you talk about having a transformative purpose, it's about making profit for the organization. In fact, the idea of brand purpose is so important that next year, the theme of the 18th Global Brand Conference, where all of these, brand experts come together and talk and present their research about brand, is on brand purpose. Okay? It just becomes so important to have a purpose, to understand who you are as an organization. When we talk about purpose here, it's not just about purpose of making profit, but it should have some sort of altruistic motives as well. Okay? And then now when we talk about purpose here, it needs to create benefits, for the society and also for the planet. By the end of it, you'll probably be sick listening to me, about how important it is to have a brand that not only generating profits, but also create an impact on the society and the planet. If you don't do that, who else is going to do it? Okay. The other thing that is quite interesting is that we need to think about, the society. We want to make sure that our children and grandchildren will enjoy this kind of this beautiful world. And then we cannot leave the world that is right now. Okay? We want to make sure that we make small changes, no matter how small it is still very important. Now, next. Now, the other thing that I just want to highlight to you is that when we did our research, we actually found it is easier for small organization to make changes. Okay, it is easier for a startup company to make changes. Okay, it is actually harder for bigger organization to make changes because they have been set up in a certain way. They have a certain culture. Okay, they have been set up in a way that the main purpose is about generating profit. So how do you shift that thinking for just making profit to creating benefits for the society and the planet? Okay. Now, I'm going to give you some examples. So earlier we talked about Ben & Jerry's, which is a big organization, a part of Unilever, is a global brand. Now I'm going to look at brands that is closer to home. Okay. So Alit Green. Okay. So Alit Green is actually Indonesia's leading certified fair trade producer and exporter of natural, organic and handmade ingredients and food products. Their main products is actually organic fair trade coconut sugar, gula aren, gula kelapa or gula aren. This is what they actually produce. So what was quite interesting, Alit Green is actually based in Bantul in Yogyakarta, but they're also one of the B Corp, one of the maybe about 27 B Corps organization in Indonesia. So they actually champion small family holders and female and disabled farmers to make changes on the society, the society where they actually based. Okay, so they actually invested. Not only they're not only just taking the products for the farmers, but they also invested heavily on the training of the farmers, of the women. Okay, and the small holders of the small home industry of coconut sugar. Yeah. So what they do is that they invested quite heavily on the infrastructure, on training, to make sure that they can produce high quality organic coconut sugar. Okay, and it's not easy. There's a lot of investment required. So next. So I'm going to show you a YouTube video about Lastiana Yuliandari. Okay, so he's actually the one who come up with the idea of creating organic fair trade coconut sugar. Is one of the first. It's actually the first in the world, and she's based in Indonesia. So the company now is like about 10 years old, and then still they're going stronger and stronger. So let's see. Hopefully, YouTube video works. So for this YouTube video, I'm not going to show you the whole video because the rest of it is just probably less relevant. Because in this video, she was, trying to kind of like apply for Asia Foundation grant or award. But you can have a little bit of idea about what Alid Green does as a brand. Okay, hopefully it works. Ooh.
Halo, saya Lastiana, saya the founder and director.
Yeah, as there's no video. Sorry. There you go.
Director of Alid Green. Alid Green is a woman-owned certified business. Kami juga trading dan manufacturing company untuk organic dan fair trade coconut sugar di Indonesia. Alid Green didirikan pada tahun 2009 di Yogyakarta, Indonesia. Saat ini kami sudah bekerja sama dengan lebih dari 1.500 petani kecil, di mana 90% adalah petani perempuan dan kurang dari 1% petani dengan difabel di Dynamic Rainfed Agroforestry. Kami ingin menjadi women social enterprise pertama di dunia yang menawarkan regenerative organic coconut sugar dari Indonesia yang juga mempromosikan healthy farming dan pemberdayaan perempuan termasuk lokal produsen. Petani biasanya panen dari pagi dan juga siang hari untuk mengumpulkan nira bunga kelapa. Setelah nira bunga kelapa dikumpulkan, kemudian akan dimasak oleh ibu-ibu petani. Setelah itu petani akan diolah selama 3-4 jam untuk menjadi gula cetak atau gula kristal yang nantinya akan langsung dibawa ke Alid Green untuk diproses di sana.
Sebelum menggunakan Odo ini kita sangat banyak menghabiskan waktu dan juga
So I'm not going to show you the rest of it because it's like the rest of it is a bit of an advertisement of this auto company. But anyway, if you are interested, have a look at this idea. I couldn't find any more videos about this this brand, but this is one of the B Corp. Have you heard about B Corp certification? So B Corp certification is the highest certification that a company could have if to show that they are actually a company that not only care about profit but also a company that prioritize society and the impact that they make on the society and the planet. So Alid Green is one of these companies. Okay, so have a look at it. When you listen to her, and if you're actually looking at her website, this is quite interesting because when she created this organization, or when she created the brand, she was not only the idea that she has in mind is not about generating as much profit as possible, but it's more about supporting the women and also the farmers from the disadvantaged background in Yogyakarta to be able to kind of like create income or sustainable income for their family, to also educate them and also to train them to produce high quality products. Okay, so that's quite interesting to see. This is an organization who start with I can make profit, okay, but the thing is my goal is about supporting the community and also the planet. Okay, next. So the next one is about commitment to sustainability. So I decided to include this for this presentation because I think this is something that students normally relate to because you hear more about the idea of sustainability. So that means that if you are, so according to one of these managers here, if you are a brand, a conscientious brand, you should be committed to sustainability. So you need to deeply care about the environment and socially to start to make that change. And I think once you have got that sort of built in your DNA of the business and the brand, then I think you can say that the brand has a conscience.
Okay, so when we talk about brands, there is a whole lot of terms that we use in terms of how we embed values in organization or in your brands. DNA is something that is quite nice to talk about because it's about how you actually embed what your values are in what you do as a brand or an organization. Okay, so for conscientious brands, they really understand that they cannot pursue unlimited growth at any cost. They recognize that there is a trade-off. If you are trying to develop a brand, if you're trying to make your brand bigger, there is a trade-off. Okay, there is an impact that you need to think about. And what is the impact? Is it negative? Is it positive? How will that impact on the society around you? How will that have an impact on the environment around you? Okay, so if you're a factory, for example, and when you try to build a second factory, have you thought about what sort of a pollution impact that you're going to create on the environment? But at the same time, you think if we're going to set up a new factory, then it will create a lot of jobs, and then that will create benefits for the society. Okay, so just these kind of things have to be thought through. This kind of thing has to be thought critically and carefully. Okay, and then the best decision will be those that have negative impact as possible to as many stakeholders as possible. So conscientious brands are actually aware and care about the impacts they have on the environment and the society, and they also have this long-term vision that goes beyond short-term economic goals and aim to develop responsible and sustainable relationships. For a lot of these brands, trying to balance the long-term and short-term goals are actually very challenging. Okay? And therefore, a lot of thinking and a lot of critical thought should be placed before you make the decision. Next. So this is really interesting. So Deloitte actually did research. This is in 2022. They identified that consumers' top 5 most important environmentally sustainable or ethical practices. So according to consumers, is that first, they need to produce sustainable packaging and products. Okay, so this is products that will make benefits to society and the planet. They will reduce waste in manufacturing processes. They will commit to ethical working practices. This is actually very important. Have you heard cases where brands in the UK we hear that very often? I'm just going to give you for example, in the past, Nike. Maybe you haven't heard about this because we're from different generation. But in my time when I was a student, one of the biggest scandal that affect Nike shoes, okay, Nike sports brands, is that they were using child labor. Okay, in fact, it was in Indonesia. Okay, so maybe they were working so hard after that scandal happened. They basically say that, it was our manufacturer because we don't own the manufacturer. We don't own the factories who produce the shoes or the clothes. Okay, so we don't really know what's happening there. But the thing is, as an organization, you still have that responsibility to make sure that your supply chain is also sustainable. Okay, that you have this responsibility to make sure that whoever workers, no matter where they come from, as long as they actually produce your products, you have responsibility towards them. Okay, so Nike has been working so hard to make sure that they're very transparent in terms of where they produce the products. They put a lot of measures in place for their suppliers to make sure that they follow that procedures, to make sure that they don't engage in abusive labor practices. Okay, so it took them a long time. Okay, it took them a long time to change that people perception. Okay. So reducing carbon footprint. So we have heard now about people, moving to electric cars, people moving to, kind of like taking public transports instead of using your own cars. And then it's about respecting human rights as well. So apparently this is the top 5 practices that consumer thinks should be done by organizations to show that they're committed to sustainable and ethical practices. Next. So this is another Indonesian brand. I thought I'm just gonna use a combination of tourism, a little bit of food brands, and also later for clothing brand. So this is Mana. So Mana is actually based in Ubud in Bali. Okay, so Mana is very interesting brand. So Mana Earthly Paradise is a regenerative and progressive eco-villas located in Bali, Indonesia. Okay, so Mana is actually comes from a Polynesian term that means life force or spiritual energy. So this is quite interesting because when you talk about Mana, everything that is happening in Mana is actually very sustainable. Okay, they're focusing more on how they want to prove that you could actually make eco-friendly, tourism destination or a hotel basically, okay, or accommodation. The other thing that they do is that I think every week they will have local craft artists to actually showcase their local products and their local crafts, and then everything that they use in the accommodation is actually eco-friendly, okay, and they source locally from Indonesia. And the best thing about Mana is that their profits is actually not going to the wallet of the owners, but it's actually going to art company. So this is basically is consortium of people who try to make changes across Asia for the better, of course. Okay, so here you can see that they're using a combination of sustainability. They're using a combination of how they can support the society. They're focusing on not just generating profits, but it's about creating a bigger impact or societal impact that will be beneficial for the society. Next, act with integrity. Okay, so this is really interesting. When we were doing our research about conscientious brands, acting with integrity is the strongest theme that comes from consumers. Okay? Almost all consumers that we interviewed or who participated in the survey actually talk about acting with integrity. So one of the things that they say is we recognize that brands actually make mistakes. The thing is, when you make mistakes, you should not just cover it up. You should own that mistakes. You should apologize and then fix that mistakes, and then we will forgive you. Okay? Because we know that brands are actually created by humans. From time to time, we make mistakes. But the most important thing is that we're not covering up. You're not covering up. It's all about owning to that mistakes and then fixing the mistakes. So this is another one why corporate social responsibility is actually being criticized heavily. Okay? So people can see through CSR nonsense and went on in the last 10 years. Okay, so they were saying there's this kind of belief like CSR is just about a ticking boxes exercise. Okay, whereas what people want to believe is what you actually do as a brand. And it's all about honesty and truthfulness in what they do. And it comes back to this something sort of baked into everything they do and don't do, rather than just initiatives. Okay, looking at your action is very important. Okay, and in fact, a lot of our managers and also consumers thought actually independent certification is very important because we just don't really believe in what organizations actually say. So having a certification such as Fair Trade or B Corp were considered very important for this for managers and also consumers, because they say that this can validate that we truly is delivering what we say we're going to deliver. So when we talk about acting with integrity, it's all about authenticity. It's about being genuine, okay, being honest, being truthful. They're very transparent and accountable for their actions, and they act on their principles, and they demonstrate the importance of their beliefs and actions to internal and external audiences. Next. So this is another research findings from Deloitte, which shows that the question that they were asking to these UK consumers is that, do business commitments to climate change and sustainability influence consumers' trust? So the answers are actually here. having the biggest, kind of like influence for them is that having a transparent, accountable, and socially and environmentally responsible supply chain is what could have an impact on how, whether the consumers will trust the brand or not. Okay, so again, it's highlighting that being honest, being truthful, being transparent, acting with integrity is so important. So this is why when we talk about conscientious brands, it's so important, because you need to remember, consumers are very sophisticated now. They don't really believe in what you say in the advertisement. What they measure you based on your actions. Okay. Next. Okay, Aqua. Everybody knows Aqua, right? What was quite interesting about Aqua is that Aqua is owned by Danone. Okay, it's a French big company. It's the equivalent of Unilever. So in 2000 so their B Corp organization, this is really interesting. Their B Corp organization, and then if you look at their tagline here, they say that through One Planet, One Health vision, we strive to deliver nourishing element of water and beverages while conserving nature and also our country. Okay, in 2018, they actually pledges to remove more plastic from the Indonesian environment than it actually uses. If you look at YouTube though, the last time that they actually talk about their commitment to environmental sustainability is 4 years ago. Nothing happened in the last 4 years. I don't know why. It's quite interesting. And then recently, Sungai Watch, Sungai River Watch, basically said that the biggest polluter of sungai or like river in Indonesia is actually Danone Aqua. Okay, so you could see, if you see Aqua is being used everywhere. Everywhere you go, you will see Aqua. Wherever you go, you will being served Aqua. They have showed their commitment to, they have showed, they say that they would be committed to reduce pollution in Indonesia, but in reality, they haven't. Check YouTube and have a look at what they actually say about environmental sustainability. The last time that they talk about environmental sustainability or the commitment to environmental sustainability in Indonesia was actually 4 years ago. So this is quite interesting. You see, what they say and what they do is actually a completely different thing. So I was speaking to one of the professors from Indonesia a few weeks ago, and I say, when we talk about conscientious brands, can you give an example of that? I don't know. At the time I was just saying, how about Aqua? Because they're a B Corp organization. I was like, no. Aqua is the biggest polluter. There was a recent issues that happening in Bali as well, in terms of how their residual kind of like limbah, is actually affecting the community there. Okay, so you could see that this is a problem. Okay, this is a company who's so big, who are promising a lot of things, but they don't really follow up with actions. Okay, there might be a lot of reasons why they haven't done that, but then at least they must show that they're progressing towards reducing the pollution in Indonesia, not contributing to the pollutions in Indonesia. Okay, next. So balancing stakeholder needs. So when we talk about the idea of conscientious brands, as I mentioned earlier, trying to balance different needs of stakeholders is probably one of the most difficult, action or most difficult commitment that conscientious brands could have. So when you talk about balancing stakeholder needs, it's all about taking into consideration the perspectives of other stakeholders and finding a balance between various interests. So it's not just about satisfying your consumers or satisfying your shareholders or people who invest in your company, but it's also about satisfying everybody else who have a stake in your organization, including your employees. Okay? So fair working conditions, for example, is being mentioned quite a lot by our consumers. What was quite interesting is when we did our interviews, in-depth interview with the consumers, we didn't see this in the survey, but when we did the interview with our consumers, funny enough, the consumers actually put two hats when we interview them. One as a consumers, when they talk positively about the brand, one as an employee of the brand that they're talking about. Okay, so they would say something. This is one of the supermarket brands in the UK, where they were saying that, I think when you talk about externally, this supermarket brand is great because they show their support on the community. They were kind of like, trying to make changes in the community. However, I work in that company. They would say, I work in that company before. And, it's never about supporting the community. It's all about the bottom line, making profit. Okay? So their employees were going, the turnover of the employees is unbelievably high because they don't treat their employees right. Okay? So that's quite important to think. So this is why, about conscientious brands, you will need to think critically. Okay? What does the impact of things that you do on your stakeholders? Okay? The easiest way to think about it is how you do have an impact on your employees and also your customers. Okay? Next. So this is an interesting one. Unilever. Okay? For sometimes, in fact, there is a case study on conscientious brands written by Nicholas Inn and also Aurel Iglesias. And then we actually talk quite a lot about this particular brand because these brands are very, very committed to the idea of creating brands with purpose. Okay, so and this was driven by maybe about 3 CEOs ago. And then they're talking about in 2019, they basically say that brands taking actions for people and the planet grew 69% faster than the rest of our business last year. Now we are committing that in the future, every Unilever brand will be a brand with purpose. And as you know, brand actually have about Unilever actually have about thousands and thousands of brands. Okay? And then what was quite interesting is that when you were started to commit to sustainability, you need to have a trade-off, right? For some time, you're probably not making a lot of money because all of the profit or the majority of profit that you're making will be used to invest in the society and the environment. Okay? And the result of this is that the shareholders get really pissed off about it. The shareholders basically say that, Unilever has lost the plot with brand purpose focus because we're not getting the profit that they say they're going to deliver. Okay, so this is a dilemma that the organization such as Unilever actually face. Okay, and then just in the end of last year, they decided that this CEO who have promoted a lot about creating brands with purpose, and then promoting that every Unilever brand should have a purpose was being removed because they were not able to satisfy their shareholders. Okay? So this is why when you talk about balancing stakeholder needs is the most difficult part of conscientious brands. If the shareholders actually leave you, you can go bankrupt easily, right? So how do you balance that? Okay? And again, this is also highlighting that when you talk about conscientious brands, it is so difficult for existing brands, especially big brands such as Unilever, to make that shifts, to make that changes. So if you're going to create a brand in the future, you want to make a brand that could have an impact on the society and the planet, you want to make sure that it is actually embedded from the beginning because it's a bit easier for you to do that than for brands that have existed for a long, long time. Okay? Next. So, I want to talk a little bit about this. This is another brand from Indonesia. Okay? So, Sukacita is also a B Corp organization. Okay? So, in here, Sukacita is actually a fashion brand, despite the fact that the founder who created Sukacita is actually not a fashion designer. Okay, so Sukacita started with a simple mission to reconnect. Okay, so their idea is here. So they felt that we have lost touch with the things, where things actually came from, and the impact of our choices that we have on the planet. Okay, so they were trying to make that changes. They're working directly with mothers in villages, not factories. When we're talking about factories, normally in, if you're talking about between the supply chain between farmers to bronze is so long. Sometimes it's too long. You got tengkulak 1, tengkulak 2, tengkulak 3, right? So and in between, you have all of these profits. They're taking all of these profits all the way through. By the time they get to the factory, it becomes really expensive. And then the one who is being disadvantaged the most are the farmers. Okay? So what Sukacita was doing is that instead of like going through all of these crazy supply chains, they went to the basic. They went to the farmers. They went to those women who were at disadvantage and then trying to support them. Okay? So next, so let's have a look at the story of Sukacita. Why they actually access. The video, please.
Aku tuh lagi cari restoran yang promonya buy one,
Not that one.
get you.
That's an advertisement. That's YouTube advert. Okay, hopefully it works.
Sukacita has never been about fashion. We don't do seasons, we're not fast. We're here because we see a need for change, and we want to invite you to be part of it. You see, the thing is, I'm not a designer. As a development consultant, I returned to Indonesia to create impact. But beyond all the boardroom meetings and reports, it didn't feel like what I was doing was making any difference. So in 2015, I started doing my own research. Going village to village, it was the first time I saw what goes behind some of the things we use every day. Women making clothes with their hands. Skills and tradition passed down mothers to daughters. It's beautiful, but I couldn't help but notice they're struggling. I had to realize that behind a simple choice like what we wear every day are women who will never meet, hands will never see, and struggle will never know because of an unfair system. And my heart was broken. Craft is not just about pretty things. It really matters because it provides work for millions of men and women working from home. The thing is, the industry practice is really dirty. Environmentally, because of thousands of tons of toxic dyes entering our waterways each year. Socially, because only a small group of middlemen and workshop owners make all the profits. The problem is that for people like you and me, we just don't know. Sukacita was created to change that. A bridge to bring you and the artisans closer. That's why we work directly with villages, not factories. Because this is where most of our artisans live and work. Yet, without any access, they often live a life of poverty. So through continuous trainings, we give them the tools to change their own lives. From business skills to environmentally friendly practices and quality management. It takes time, but for us, it's the only way. Started with only 3 women, we now empower more than 100 artisans. With our craft schools, we want to reach 1,000 more over the next 5 years. Made Right is our transparency standard. It's a promise that everything we make pays a living wage, is kind to the earth, and uses heritage craft. Every time you choose Made Right, you contribute to end pollution and exploitation. You know exactly where and who made your clothes, and the impact it had on someone's life. Sukacita means happiness in Indonesian. It embodies our mission to return pride to those who have been invisible for too long.
Okay, next.
Keju protein.
So, just the final thing here. Technology is always difficult, no matter how advanced it is. Anyway, while we're waiting, do you have any questions? Anyone? Question in Indonesian is also okay. Any questions, yeah? Nama? Yeah?
All right, good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you very much for the explanation. It's really inspiring me because I'm really interested with the sustainability concept, and I still learn and I have to learn a lot of concept of sustainability. And one of my questions is when we told us about the implementation of brand consciousness, and my question is, if we have to look in Indonesia, we can see is as optimistic or not if we say in 5 years later, whether it is for a big brand or for the small brands like that you already presented here. So that's my question. Thank you very much.
Do you think it's possible?
Yes, I think it's possible.
So I think it's quite interesting. So I started entertaining the idea of conscientious brands maybe in about 2016. Okay, so when I was delivering the lecture in the UK, I think because the students are already being exposed to the idea of sustainability, they're very enthusiastic about it, especially for students from Europe. Okay, and then the interesting thing is, have you heard about Sustainable Development Goals? Yeah, so for 2020, that's kind of like the 2030 is not far away, and then we still have a lot of things to do, right? So in our university, for example, all of our courses need to embed the idea of sustainability. In fact, as a part of our curriculum, we have to highlight how sustainability is actually shown in what we teach. Okay. The other thing that is quite interesting is also we have to, every time I publish a paper or if I conduct research, I have to highlight which sustainable development goals that we actually address. Okay. In 2016, when I developed this course in the UK, or if I do a guest lecture, this is before I actually have the primary research. People were actually talking about, they're very open about it in Europe and in the UK. And then I went to Hong Kong and I teach my students, and the majority of the students are actually upper middle managers. So they're very senior. They work in the marketing departments, or they're business managers. They're very skeptical about it, absolutely skeptical. They're like, my boss will never allow me to do all of these things. They will never let me even talk about the idea how we're going to make contribution to the society and the planet. It's all about making profit, right? 2016, 17, 18, then you see changes. Suddenly, they want to know more about environmental practices. They want to know more how I could actually develop a brand with sustainability. The other thing that was quite interesting is I asked my students, to kind of like, as a part of their assessment, to develop a brand. Okay, that's part of their assessment, is to develop a brand. We see a lot of changes in what the students actually, we can track trends by looking at what the students develop in their assessment. And then we see there's a lot more changes in terms of how, what sort of brands that the students actually create. And then recently, a lot more brands are focusing more the impact on the environment and the impact on the society. I would never seen that about 10 years ago. Okay, so my answer is, yeah, definitely it's possible. Okay, in fact, a couple of years ago, when I kind of like still looking at this idea of conscientious brand, I did research and deliver it in Indonesia, and they were just like, what is this? I don't believe this. But then the conversation changed. Okay, there's a lot more, for example, students who are thinking about going abroad to study, and they're looking at sustainability practices as a topic for their thesis. They're looking at a PhD in the area of sustainability, for example. Not only the impact on the environment, but also the impact on the society. So it's definitely very possible. It may take a lot of time, a lot of efforts, a lot of support for the government. But you also need to remember, right? We say about, for companies, for big companies, the bigger the companies, the older the companies, the harder it is for them to change, because they have to change the culture, they have to change their system, they have to change their infrastructure. And it's the same. You need to remember that Indonesia is the 4th biggest country in the world. It's not like Hong Kong or Singapore. Okay? You got 17,000 islands. Singapore is only one tiny city. Okay? So there will be a lot of efforts, there will be a lot of investment, there will be a lot of resources required, there will be a lot of willingness to make these changes. And then sometimes you cannot rely that from the government. They also don't have a lot of resources. So that's why if you're developing a brand, or if you're working for brands in the future, you can make that small changes no matter how small it is. I love this, there is I don't know if you heard about Tesco. So Tesco has this slogan, we say, every little helps. Okay? So this is why you may not make radical changes very quickly. It's very difficult to make radical changes, but you can make small changes. And I do believe that if it's not 5 years, it could be in 10 years, it could be in 15 years, it could be in 20 years, you will move towards sustainability somehow. Because the planet cannot sustain, in the way that if we're going in the same rate like what we are now, it's going to be, a problem. We could talk about global warming issues all the time now. So you could see a lot of signs. Okay, so I do believe that it will change somehow, but you should not also forget that Indonesia is a big nation. It has a lot more challenges than countries such as Singapore or countries such as Norway, because for them now, they would say in 2030, there will be no petrol vehicles. They're all going to be electric vehicles. But Norway is very small. Okay, you got 17,000 islands, over 700 languages, for example. Okay, so it takes a lot of time. But what you do not, but one thing that I want to say, you should not be ignorant. Okay, you need to recognize that you could make that changes by making small step towards that changes. Okay, so will that clear? I don't know. I'm an optimist, but I also a realist. So I recognize that it doesn't happen overnight. Okay, especially in a nation such as Indonesia, where there are a lot of challenges. Okay, is that all right?
All right, thank you very much. So I would like to conclude that it is matters if we have to make a small move on an individual or collective move, right?
Yeah, it's the first step. It's the most important. Okay, if you never make that step, nothing will change. It's the first step. It's the willingness. You have to start with being aware about the impact of your action. No matter how small it is, you have to start with a small step. Okay? Making radical changes is difficult. I know that. Okay?
All right.
Is that all right?
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the answers and
No problem.
explanations.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about these conclusions and managerial implications, and then we can talk more, about the idea of conscientious brands. So first, just to conclude, when we talk about the conscientious brands, we need to think about conscientious brands are actually internally driven by conscientious principles. Okay, so it's normally about the values within the organization. Delineate their transformative purpose. So you need to have this willingness to change the world, no matter how small it is. Recognize that you have an influence. Be confident that you could actually make that change. Embed sustainability into your strategy. Okay, thinking about how you can make contribution to the society and the planet. Internal culture of accountability and responsibility. You need to be able to take that responsibility. If you make mistakes, admit that you make mistakes. Don't cover it up. Everybody learns from their mistake, no matter how small or how big it is. Act with integrity and balance stakeholder needs is all about action. Action. It's all about transparency. It's about making sure that your stakeholders, that you take into consideration your stakeholders' need, not just one particular group of stakeholders. And as we discussed earlier, this is the most difficult part. Measure, report, and communicate your actions, okay? So this is quite interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, for the majority of consumers and also managers, the third party certification is actually very important, okay? Because most consumers, they don't always believe is what the companies actually say. But if you can say, here is a third party, has validated that we are a conscientious brand, then your consumers are likely to trust that. So in the UK, we have this fair trade, or even globally, you have this fair trade certification, or Rainforest Alliance certification, or Carbon Trust certification, or even B Corp certification. Consumers, when they know about the certifications, they tend to believe them more. Okay? Communicate their action. This is quite interesting. There is a balance. Okay, there is a balance about just saying how good you are without supported by evidence. Consumers are likely to believe what you say if you have the evidence to back it up. Okay, so this is, again, it's quite interesting. When we were speaking to our consumers, they basically say, we can see the bullshit of the advertisements. Okay, we don't believe in advertisement. But what we believe is when the company actually use numbers, use evidence, real evidence to show what changes that they have made. Even if they haven't made that progress, if they're being very honest to us and say, like, we're working towards this. This is the small changes that we have made. They tend to believe that companies more, okay? And then it's focusing more on innovation. This is quite interesting as well. For conscientious brands, it's not that you don't take risks. You need to take risks because the world is very complex. The technology become very advanced. Consumers become very important. The resources getting smaller. So as a brand, you still have to innovate. As a brand, you need to identify different ways of how you can make these brands become more sustainable, how we can find, how my brand can survive, okay? And the other thing that we found from the research is that your consumers will not buy your products just based on the sustainability promise. This is important because your brands still need to create values to your consumers. They will not buy your brand just because you're creating positive impact on the society. There has to be a give back because they spend money on it. You want to make sure that, okay, you spend a little bit of money, more money for buying my brands, but you will get good quality products, and at the same time, you're going to create a good you will make positive contribution to the society and the planet. So the combination of having this good quality products or values that the consumers look for, and also creating positive impact on the society and the planet is the best combination for consumers. Okay, it become an issue if you were saying like you buy the products because we're going to donate that to the society, but there is no value to you. You will not get anything good from my brand. They will not buy that. Because in the end of the day, consumers earn money, they cannot be able to have a better life, So you need to create positive values to your consumers and your stakeholders, and also the society and the planet. Okay, well, thank you so much for listening to me. I will not be able maybe show this to you, but I just want you, if you can, scan this QR code and then type which brands that you think, what are the examples of conscientious brands that you can think of. It could be Indonesian brands, it could be global brands, it could be any brands. I just want to know because I think it's quite interesting. We could come up with a lot of brands that are great in Europe because I'm based in the UK. But I also want to know what are the brands that you think are conscientious from Indonesia. So I just don't know whether I actually can get the access through my mobile phone. Meter. Hopefully I can. One second. Let's see. So just want to see what your answer is. It's just because it's too much hassle if I have to go back and then log in from that. Hopefully I can. Okay, so I can have access here. So I'm going to read your results. So I got the Body Shop. Who say Jarum here? Really? Jarum? Why Jarum? We were just kind of like talking about, this is an example of a brand who were trying to target children to smoke. And you talk like Jarum is a conscientious brand. I was like, okay. Sensatia Botanicals, that's a really interesting one. The Body Shop. Wardah, that is a really good example. Wardah is probably one of the most innovative brands that I can think of if you think about cosmetic brands, right? Uniqlo, this is an interesting one. One of my colleagues is actually Japanese. And then we're talking about, I say, I like Uniqlo brand. I never really know about what they do. And then she was saying, Uniqlo is one of the worst brands in Japan. They were using a lot of cheap labor. I was like, really? It's interesting. And then Parongpong Recycle. Anyone knows about this brand, Parongpong Recycle? Yeah? So what do you do? Oh, right. Okay. That's a really interesting one. I'm going to have a look at that. Waste for Change. Gojek. Why do you think Gojek is a conscientious brand? Do they treat their employees right? Do they treat their employees right? No? They got the cheapest. I was saying to one of my friends, so if I book Gojek or Grab, especially in Jakarta, right? And then if you're stuck in the traffic jam for 3 hours, what do you do then? I was like, well, you just give the driver a tip because it will not be recognized in the app. Is this real? Sejauh mata memandang? Is that a real brand? Yes, what is it?
It's similar like sukacita.
Uh-huh.
And the brand is from Bali, I think.
Oh, wow, okay.
It's very similar with sukacita and it's the most very sustainable for the patient.
Ah, okay, I'm going to have a look at that. That's a really good one. Eco print batik dahun. Eco print batik dahun. Where is that based? Anyone? Bandung? Is it Bandung? No, you're just like, I don't know. Okay, Danone Aqua, really? I think like during the whole lecture you were sleeping, yeah? For the whole lecture you were sleeping, I can tell that. It's just kind of, oh, he was talking about Danone Aqua. I'm sure like it's a conscientious brand, really. Okay, Rasa Nusantara, what is that? Jamu, okay. Oh, really? Oh, wow, that's a really good one. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I'm actually really interested to do more research about Indonesian brands because of the heritage and also about, the message that they put across. Okay. JNA. Why JNA? I'm asking an honest question here. Why JNA? Anyone? JNA? Why? I know like if you send something with JNA, it will arrive tomorrow. It's amazing. Batik Fractal. Batik Fractal, anyone? Do you know what's a brand? Batik Fractal? No? Maybe some of the online guys. Yeah? You so shy? No? Let me think. BCA? Why BCA? Bang. BCA. I know BCA is bang. But why? Why do you think it's conscientious brand? No? I was just like, I don't know. I just come up with it and see what happens. Okay. Right. I think this is really great to see, you kind of like actually come up with some brands. Some of you were sleeping and come up with Jarum or Danone Aqua, but anyway, that's okay. But yeah, no, I think this is really interesting. I think, you will see these examples. These brands probably started small, okay? But if you look at Alit Green, they have started since 2009 or 2008, right? So it shows that it can be sustainable. It can last long. Okay, but you have to start small. You have to start with little steps to make bigger steps and bigger change. Okay? Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for those who are in the class and also for those online. It has been a pleasure. I learned a lot for all of these brands that you have given me. But also, I don't know whether we have time for a question and answer or we need to finish. I'm not sure. I can't talk about brands all day long, you see. This is a problem. Yeah? Okay. Question from anyone who wants to ask questions or online, if you have any questions. Oh, yes, yeah. Questions? Here.
Okay, I'm trying to ask in Indonesia, it's okay. Terima kasih sebelumnya kesempatannya. Nama saya Aurora Yupita dari Pasca Sarjana Administrasi Bisnis. Sebelumnya tadi sempat ditanyakan juga terkait tentang penerapan sustainability di Indonesia gitu. Kalau misalkan di UK sendiri, itu tuh dimulai dari siapanya? Dari konsumennya, pemerintahnya, atau dari perusahaan-perusahaannya? Karena kadang kalau kita mulai dari konsumennya dulu, konsumen itu terbentur barang yang disediakan oleh produsen juga nggak sustain. Tapi nanti kalau dari produsen juga terbentur polisinya, dari pemerintah juga belum mendukung untuk aturan-aturan yang seperti itu gitu. Jadi kalau dari UK sendiri tuh dari mana mulainya untuk menerapkan sustainability itu supaya semua bagian itu tuh ikut dalam sustainability ini. Seperti itu. Terima kasih.
Pertanyaan yang bagus sekali ya. I'm just trying to think switch now. Kalau misalnya di UK itu atau kita contoh-contoh itu banyak collective effort is very important, ya. Karena gini, kita nggak bisa buat changes kalau nggak ada collective effort. Contoh di Scotland. Skotlandia di antara 4 negara di UK, Skotlandia itu paling advance untuk sustainability effortnya. And sustainability effortnya itu kalau kita ngelihat strategi dari Scottish government, dia embed itu sustainable development goals di everything yang mereka lakukan, gitu ya. Jadi support dari pemerintah itu penting. Support dari pemerintah itu penting. Tapi kadang pemerintah itu suka telat, tahu nggak? Jadi pemerintah itu respon tuh lama. Karena mereka sebelum buat polisi tertentu, mereka tuh harus memikirkan tentang impact-impact yang dihasilkan dari polisi tersebut. Oke, bisa dihasilkan mungkin mereka nggak punya, recycling dah ya. Contoh recycling. Dulu waktu sebelum kita kalau di UK sekarang, kalau mungkin di Indonesia sekarang mulai kan recycling sampah bisa dimasukkan yang organik atau non organik. Kalau di UK itu kita udah nggak mikir gitu loh, sampah harus masuk di organik, kita harus masuk yang recycling atau non recyclable. Itu mulainya memang harus dari individual, dari ada willingness. Tapi infrastructure itu pemerintah punya andil. Nah, company itu sebenarnya yang between consumer sama pemerintah, ya kan? Kebanyakan juga waktu pemerintah menerapkan suatu inisiatif, kita selalu ada lobby-lobby gitu loh dari lobby-lobby dari mana namanya? Dari perusahaan yang mungkin nggak setuju dengan proposalnya dari pemerintah. Jadi itu kan lama ini implementasinya. Nah, sedangkan dari perusahaan sendiri itu mereka lebih punya kebebasan. Mereka lebih punya kebebasan. Nah, kolektif dari perusahaan, kalau memang itu tujuannya untuk yang lebih baik, kolektif dari perusahaan sendiri itu bisa sangat powerful, gitu. Karena perusahaan itu kan lebih dekat dengan masyarakat daripada pemerintah dengan masyarakat. Juga posisi perusahaan itu sukanya di tengah antara government juga dengan society atau dengan consumers, ya kan? Jadi kalau saya bilang itu nggak ada yang mana lebih dulu, Tapi kalau government itu datangnya suka telat, gitu. Kebanyakan inisiatif-inisiatif yang baru itu dari perusahaan loh. Innovation itu kebanyakan dari perusahaan. Karena kamu secara individual itu juga mungkin nggak punya power kan. Tapi kalau kamu sebagai perusahaan, itu kamu punya kesempatan, kamu punya resources, walaupun itu sekecil apapun. Kalau tujuannya itu mulia atau tujuannya itu baik, pasti hasilnya juga lebih baik gitu. Nah kalau biasanya, kalau saya suka ngomong gini, kalau misalnya perusahaan kadang suka latah ya kan. Dia bilang, oh ini perusahaan ini kok bisa berhasil ya. Nanti satu perusahaan lagi ngikutin. Satu perusahaan lagi ngikutin. Gini kayak Sustainable Development Goals. Dulu pertama kali di launch, siapa yang mau ngikutin? Dari United Nations. Tapi lama-lama banyak juga yang ngikutin. Lama-lama banyak kayak CSR, kan? Salah satu perusahaan dulu, kita buat CSR. Lalu tiba-tiba mungkin 10 tahun kemudian baru pemerintah bilang, oh tiap perusahaan harus punya CSR. Tapi itu kan inisiatifnya datangnya dari perusahaan itu sendiri, bukan dari pemerintah. Nanti kalau pemerintah sudah implementasi, nah itu mungkin bisa eskalasi hasilnya, impactnya itu bisa lebih banyak, ya kan? Tapi kayak saya tadi bilang, government itu prioritasnya banyak. Government itu masalah yang harus diatasi itu banyak sekali. Kadang masalah sustainability mereka bilang, kita ngomong tentang baju bekas. Ingat nggak? Baju bekas waktu itu kan memang import kan ya agak susah juga ya kalau import baju bekas dari luar negeri. Tapi government kan bilang, kita nggak mau deh kamu jualan baju bekas di Indonesia karena itu bisa mematikan UMKM gitu loh. Sedangkan kalau misalnya di luar negeri, nah tapi kalau misalnya baju bekas dalam negeri mungkin lebih oke ya kan. Kalau misalnya di luar negeri itu sekarang ada loh, kita itu trennya malah anak-anak muda sekarang ini kalau shopping bukan di toko-toko baru, shoppingnya malah di charity shop atau shoppingnya itu di second hand. Ada website namanya Vinted, pernah dengar nggak? Ya, Vinted itu mereka jual-jual khusus baju-baju, barang-barang fashion yang bekas. Ya, itu konsumernya banyak sekali. Malah anak-anak muda mereka bilang, saya merasa guilty kalau saya pergi ke toko untuk beli baju baru. Jadi mending saya extend life cycle dari extend product life cycle dari baju ini dengan cara membeli baju bekas, ya kan? Baju bekas yang masih bagus. Kalau di UK kamu ngelihat di jalan-jalan itu banyak toko-toko charity. Jadi mungkin dari British Red Cross atau Cancer Research atau Shelter, itu mereka terima barang bekas. Jadi kita kasih donation kan, kita cari donation. Kalau misal di rumah gitu kita juga ini tiap minggu gitu ada yang ngasih ini apa kantongan gitu, dia bilang ini kalau kamu mau donate apa hari Senin kita ambil gitu. Kita donate terus kan. Jadi kita berhenti beli baju, kita donate. Terus nanti baju itu sampai di mana namanya di charity shop kita beli, itu uangnya untuk dipakai untuk ini bantu masyarakat, ya tergantung charity-nya apa gitu kan. Itu juga contoh inisiatif. Jadi kita itu kontribusi dengan merasa lebih baik beli baju-baju yang mungkin yang second hand kayak gitu. Kemarin waktu saya di sini saya ketemu sama ini kolega saya bilang gini, Nathalia kok aneh ya, di Eropa itu sekarang anaknya kuliah di Eropa, terus dia bilang di Eropa itu sekarang waktu anak saya dia bilang oh nggak usah deh, saya nggak usah beli iPhone yang paling baru, ini yang ini aja masih bisa dipakai kok, saya nggak mau ganti. Dia bilang kok kayaknya di Eropa itu malah backwards ya trennya, kok consumerism itu semakin menurun ya. Itu lucu loh, karena karena mereka pandangannya sudah mulai berubah karena sustainability itu. Oke. Jadi mereka juga sekarang gini, waktu saya masters ya, riset saya itu tentang fast fashion, tentang country of origin. Oke. Ini sekarang berubah loh. Kalau kamu ngelihat dari newspaper atau kamu dari lihat baca-baca tentang tren, itu banyak anak-anak muda sekarang yang pilihannya itu membeli baju sekali tapi bisa tahan lama. Daripada beli baju murah, ya kan, baju murah yang bisa gonta-ganti tiap hari. Karena pikirannya sudah berubah, yaitu karena mereka dipengaruhi dengan sustainability. Jadi itu kolektif bersama. Beberapa perusahaan kayak H&M atau waktu itu Lacoste juga, mereka malah encourage recycle. Jadi kamu kalau recycle bajumu yang lama, kamu bisa mungkin dapat voucher. Walaupun saya punya ini sendiri sih, pandangan sendiri, kan berarti tambah encourage ini dong. Kamu dikasih voucher kan mau tambah encourage mau beli lagi ya kan. Jadi saya nggak terlalu setuju sih juga kayak gitu. Cuma kan mungkin kalau bisnis-bisnis gitu kan mereka mencari celah-celah juga kan ya. Jadi memang itu tanggung jawab bersama. Tapi kamu nggak bisa mengandalkan government. Jadi kalau kamu punya perusahaan, ya makanya kita ngomong tentang brand. Kalau kamu kalau kamu punya brand, itu brand lebih powerful loh, lebih powerful dari consumer, kadang lebih powerful dari government. Kayak yang tadi bilang, mereka impact-nya itu nggak cuma satu nation. Kalau misalnya apalagi udah global brand ya, impact-nya itu bisa global. Oke. Apa itu menjawab pertanyaanmu? Oke. Oh iya, oke, nggak apa-apa. Pertanyaan, ada pertanyaan? Ya? Oh ya, mau tanya silakan. Itu Rizky sama Sally bisa nggak? Oh bisa, bisa dengar. Oh ternyata nggak dengar Mbak Linda. Oke, pertanyaannya.
Mohon izin memberikan pertanyaan dalam bahasa Indonesia, Ibu.
Ya, silakan ya.
Izin memperkenalkan diri, saya Serli Febrianti dari Program Studi Administrasi Bisnis Kampus Pangandaran. Mohon izin bertanya, Prof. Jadi di Indonesia, dalam peduli lingkungan sekitar dan banyak juga ajang perlombaannya. Akan tetapi, produk tersebut itu jarang dapat diterima oleh masyarakat. Sebagai contoh saja, pembeku minyak goreng misalnya. Namun alih-alih membeli pembeku minyak untuk dibuang secara mungkin secara lebih aman dan safety, namun masyarakat itu lebih memilih untuk membeli minyak secara langsung, membeli minyak yang lebih baru gitu ya, daripada membeli pembeku minyak yang mungkin lebih tidak aware terhadap lingkungan sekitarnya. Nah, untuk hal seperti itu, apakah terdapat strategi dan tips dalam memasarkan produk agar produk tersebut itu cukup sukses dan mudah diterima di masyarakat berdasarkan dari Conscientious brand yang ada di luar negeri? Seperti itu, Prof.
Thank
Terima
you.
kasih.
Ini interesting ya, karena begini, untuk conscientious brand, kita kan punya lebih banyak resources kalau kita conscientious brands companies itu punya resources lebih banyak dari consumers. Kalau kita mengembangkan produk yang kita tahu bakal baik untuk society dan environment, juga untuk consumer. Jadi jangan lupa lah ya, kalau kita ngomong tentang brand, itu kamu harus mikir, itu brand itu tentang value. Value itu in the eyes of the beholder. Jadi value itu sesuai value untuk tiap orang ini kan beda-beda, ya kan? Jadi kalau kamu mau menciptakan produk, ya, yang kamu percaya ini produk ini benar-benar bisa bisa mengubah society atau environment untuk menjadi lebih baik. Tapi kamu jangan lupa, value itu harus ada buat consumer juga. Gitu ya. Karena kan mereka spending money, itu keringat loh ya, keluar untuk keringat dan darah untuk dapat gaji bulanan untuk kamu bisa spend gitu kan. Itu kamu harus mikirkan itu. Jadi apa sih value-nya itu untuk consumer? Bagi consumer, kalau mereka bisa kontribusi dengan society, to society and the environment, dan juga barang itu atau produk itu atau brand itu bisa memberikan value untuk mereka, itu yang kombinasi yang paling top tier, ya kan? Nah, kebanyakan consumer itu memang mungkin tidak mempunyai pengetahuan yang cukup tentang kenapa sih kok ini brand ini lebih baik daripada brand-brand yang lain. Kenapa sih kok produk ini dianggap inovatif? Apa yang membuat brand itu inovatif? Jadi waktu kamu menjual brand itu atau memasarkan brand itu, kamu harus benar-benar highlight ini loh. Kenapa kok kamu harus beli brand ini? Apa sih value dari brand ini untuk consumer? Dan juga apa sih value brand ini untuk society and also environment? Jadi kita kan sering ngomong tentang trade off ya. Kita ngomong, ini brand mungkin jauh mahal lebih sedikit, tapi ketika kamu membeli brand ini lebih bagus dari environment, lebih bagus untuk society. Nah, consumer kan masih mikir, ini cuma beda Rp2.000 aja kok, aku ya beli yang brand ini aja. Karena mereka tahu, ini ternyata brand ini baik untuk kesehatanku, ini baik untuk society, ini baik untuk environment. Tapi consumer itu selfish, manusia itu selfish. Mereka mikirnya selalu, apa sih brand ini value-nya untuk diriku sendiri itu apa? Itu yang harus kamu selalu pikirkan. Makanya inovasi itu sangat penting di idea dari conscientious brands. Kalau sekarang kita ngomong tentang electric car, electric car kan mahalnya minta ampun ya kan, mahalnya mahal sekali. Bagi the majority of consumer, mereka nggak bisa afford electric car itu karena terlalu mahal. Ya akhirnya ya tetap aja. Cuman kalau misalnya sekarang kan semua pada pontang-panting nih, di China kan mereka produce electric car murah, ya kan? Jadi consumer yang bilang, aku mau jadi consumer yang conscientious, aku mau jadi consumer yang environmentally aware, aku mau jadi consumer yang support environment. Jadi aku bakal beli electric car, tapi aku kan nggak bisa afford nih electric car yang mahal, aku bisanya electric car yang murah, ya kan? Jadi value itu harus dimulai, kamu harus mikirkan target marketmu itu siapa gitu loh. Jadi apa yang saya bilang tadi, kalau kamu mau jadi conscientious brand, kamu juga harus memikirkan needs dari stakeholdermu, termasuk consumer. Jadi nggak bisa cuman, oh ini benefit sama ini benefit sama untuk society sama planet, tapi nggak ada benefitnya untuk consumermu. Itu nggak bisa, karena tujuan brand itu kamu dapat mendapatkan uang atau kamu mendapatkan profit, itu kan dari consumer juga, mereka yang beli, mereka yang bayar uang, kan? Jadi itu balance itu yang difficult. Education itu paling penting untuk consumer. Jadi kamu harus mengedukasikan consumer. Kenapa kok beli barang ini tuh lebih baik daripada beli minyak goreng yang baru, gitu. Menjawab pertanyaanmu nggak, Rizky, Shirley?
Cukup menjawab, Prof.
Okay.
Namun, terima kasih banyak, Prof. Sebelum itu, apakah berkenan jika rekan saya mengajukan pertanyaan juga, Prof?
Ya, nggak apa-apa. Saya sih oke-oke aja.
Izin Prof, selamat siang.
Ya.
Perkenalkan, nama saya Rizky Fatahila dari Program Studi Administrasi Bisnis Kampus Pangandaran. Jadi seperti ini, Prof. Saya saat ini memiliki bisnis, yaitu sambal di dalam menggunakan packaging botol kaca, Prof.
Oke.
Nah, jadi saya tuh mau, kayak menurut pandangan saya tuh, ini tuh bisa digunakan lagi gitu. Jadi kayak kita memberikan promo gitu loh, Prof, kepada pelanggannya untuk yang pelanggannya tuh kayak mengembalikan lagi packagingnya ke kita gitu, Prof. Tapi menurut pandangan saya, itu tuh masih hal yang tabu gitu, Prof, di masyarakat. Jadi kayak masyarakat tuh menganggap hal itu apaan sih, kotor gitu. Menurut pandangan Prof sendiri tuh gimana sih, Prof? Terima kasih banyak, Prof.
Oke, thank you. Ini inovatif ya, idenya ya. So ini interesting sih, karena begini, kalau misalnya, again, ini kembali untuk edukasi ke consumer ya kan. Itu kan kalau misalnya kamu beli botol sambal, itu kan mungkin pandangannya langsung, oh ini kotor gitu kan, ini kan kotor. Jadi kamu harus menunjukkan, loh kenapa kok aman sih sebenarnya kalau misalnya kamu mengembalikan botol itu dipakai lagi. Mungkin kamu harus lebih transparan untuk menunjukkan bagaimana sih kamu mensterilkan botol-botol tersebut, ya kan? Itu penting karena consumer itu jadi nggak cuman advertisement ya. Waktu kita melakukan riset dengan consumer, itu consumer mereka lebih mau tahu gitu loh, proses-proses apa sih yang kamu lakukan buat ensure that produk itu safe. Kalau produk itu kalau di konteks kamu kan, kalau misalnya botol itu bersih, kalau misalnya botol itu bisa dipakai lagi, oke? Itu penting ya. Jadi education untuk pengetahuan yang kamu berikan ke consumer itu penting sekali loh. Jadi itu enggak cuman advertising, education itu juga penting. Karena tadi saya bilang, consumer ini semakin pinter, semakin clever, dia enggak percaya sama advertisingmu. Tapi kalau kamu transparan, itu lain, ceritanya lain. Dan itu harus terus ya. Itu enggak bisa kamu sekali ngomong terus lupa. Tapi kamu harus terus education. Dan itu juga kamu harus mikirkan apa sih value-nya buat consumers? Trade off-nya itu apa? Kan kadang orang bilang gini, aduh kalau misalnya beli botol mau dikembalikan mesti dicuci dulu, apa gitu kan, males gitu kan ya. Nah kamu harus menunjukkan, kenapa kok walaupun itu effortnya sedikit, malah nyuci cuma 5 menit aja loh nggak apa-apa, nggak sampai 5 menit gitu. Tapi benefitnya untuk society itu apa? Benefitnya untuk consumer itu apa? Mungkin bisa harganya bisa lebih murah kayak gitu kan. Kalau misalnya kamu ke Starbucks, gak tahu di sini sama nggak? Kalau kita di Starbucks ya, kalau kamu bawa botol sendiri atau cup sendiri, itu dapat diskon, ya kan? Dulu kan itu tabu juga kan, walah masuk pergi ke Starbucks bawa botol sendiri. Tapi orang-orang banyak sekarang yang bawa botol sendiri kan. Mungkin dikasih diskon sedikit atau gimana. Itu kan itu juga value untuk consumers ya. Menjawab pertanyaanmu enggak? Jadi pengetahuan, transparansi, value untuk consumer itu penting loh. Kamu jangan sampai lupa kalau consumer itu yang mengeluarkan uang untuk membeli barangmu. Ya kan? Jadi kamu jangan sampai lupa value dari consumer itu juga part dari balancing stakeholder needs. Mereka masih mau value for money juga. Oke. Kayaknya ada satu lagi deh, Putri. Cukup ya?
Cukup.
Oke.
Terima kasih banyak, Prof. Nah.
Kalau ada pertanyaan lagi bisa ini deh, connect saya di LinkedIn ya. Cari nama saya boleh, mau chat di LinkedIn juga boleh. Kalau mau Google saya juga boleh, mau email saya juga boleh, nggak apa-apa. Nanti kalau bisa saya jawab ya pasti saya jawab pertanyaannya. Oke. Terima kasih teman-teman dan juga atas entusiasmenya.
Nah, oke, seru banget ya. Kayaknya kalau misalkan ditambahin sejam lagi, teman-teman masih banyak nih yang mau tanya. Nah, buat yang mau tanya, silakan pertanyaannya disimpan. Nanti bisa menghubungi Bu Nathalia lewat LinkedIn ya, atau ditanyakan ke dosen pengampu. Tapi tenang ya, Bu Nathalia nanti juga akan memberikan sesi kuliah lanjutan lagi di series berikutnya. Jadi tolong dinantikan saja ya, nanti akan ada poster berikutnya kami share. Oke, terima kasih untuk Bu Nathalia, terima kasih banyak sudah berkenan untuk sharing. Terus teman-teman yang ada di sini juga ya, terima kasih banyak sudah menyempatkan diri. Nah, ini acaranya saya tutup. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Nah, tapi sebelum ditutup, kita dokumentasi dulu boleh nggak? Nah, nanti berangkat kuliahnya kalian harus lari-lari. Gak apa-apa ya, bentar saja. Terima kasih.